I am profoundly honored and exceedingly humble to have the opportunity to be the moderator of this panel tonight. The panel is about the conversation on powering Africa's future. Having said that, let me first frankly say congratulations again to all of tonight's honorees. Congratulations. Vivienne, Thandika, and Jay. I have to say that I have been hugely impressed because I have found the AAI as an incredibly important event that presents you with very rare opportunities for people like me who are in journalism to recruit. As a matter of fact, I have a deal with Professor Thandika, Mkandawire rather, who will be on my show on Wednesday, Straight Talk Africa, live from Washington. So I thank you so much, the organizers, for having invited me to come and be your moderator this evening. Now, we will now begin the conversation about Africa's future through regional and global partnerships. Indeed, it is an honor for me to moderate the conversation with three of our esteemed honorees. Let me, first of all, frankly say that I will present three questions relating to the theme. And then, of course, the fourth question is from AAI's social media network. In September, AAI launched a social media contest where AAI's social media network submitted questions to be asked during the conversation. The winner of the contest is Chika Dunga, who is with us tonight. It sounds like when I look at the name Chika Dunga, is a man probably from the land of the ogres. Africa's, of course, most populous nation, that is Nigeria. I hope I'm right. Let's begin with the first question. Let me come to you, Jay. You live in Nairobi, one of the most beautiful cities, of course, on the continent. You're a former army captain, correct?
Yes.
Interesting. What are your thoughts and feelings about receiving an award from AAI this evening? Your reaction, really.
Well, thank you. Thanks for your words, and again, welcome everybody. I thought the award was great from the standpoint of the recognition of what companies can do. I only represent the 1,800 plus employees and obviously our corporation, but we're able to, I think, hopefully make a difference, and most importantly, as I said, hopefully set an example that that can be followed by other companies as they continue to invest in Africa. And I think recognition of that by AAI is somewhat of a stamp of approval for that strategy, and I hope that people see it that way and again follow us on the path that we're on.
Do you promise that you and General Electric are going to light Africa?
We're doing our best.
I know there is someone here who was a very important person in a very important country in Africa. When he took office, he promised to light that particular country. It never happened. The next time, in fact, I have him on the show, I'd like to walk him back in memory lane and find out what really happened. Let me come to you, Professor Mkandawire. Obviously a pioneer, the first perhaps African, frankly, to have that kind of position at the great London School of Economics. And if it hadn't been for the AAI, that probably could not have happened. Your immediate reaction, I mean, I saw a bit of emotions and what have you.
Well, as I said earlier on, of course, it's just on a personal level, a very deep sense of gratitude. But I also wanted to say something perhaps a little bit different, which is that it's very rare that African academics are given any public recognition. And so I would take this as not only something given to me, but I hope it's recognition of the many African scholars and academics who have contributed in various ways to the African continent. So I think this, on behalf of my many colleagues, really thank them for, thank the AI for this gift.
You are definitely a trailblazer. You're a pathfinder of sorts.
Well, pathfinder, well, actually, not really, because LSE had Nkrumah and Jomo Kenyatta went to LSE. So
As students.
As students. And Kenyatta wrote his famous Facing Mount Kenya.
Facing Mount Kenya, yeah.
While at LSE. So there were people, were following somebody's steps. Nyao was following somebody's steps, if you like.
You're following in
It's
the
true that
footsteps.
this is I'm the first holder of the chair. But as I said, there were pioneers. There were many other people ahead of us who one follows.
What about my sister Vivienne? Your immediate reactions, please.
The award really is very, very inspirational. The kind of work that we do, though in finance and banking, is not sort of the glamorous banking that many of us are accustomed with. We work behind the scenes in very difficult environments, and our work normally is not seen in the short term. The impact of our work is more in the medium to long term. Mm-hmm. So the fact that I've been able to receive this award, I hope will also inspire all the others that work in similar circumstances to continue to do more. Yeah.
What is the secret behind your apparent success at the East African Development Bank?
As I said in my remarks, we have worked very, very hard to deliver practical solutions to as large a number of people as we can. And we've tried to tackle key sectors that we think would contribute to the economic development of the region. Mm-hmm. So we've worked in health, trying to develop treatment solutions that can be rolled out in a large scale for a large number of people. We're also working in education, trying to improve on tertiary vocational training, again, with solutions that can be replicated quickly across the board. The financial sector has also been a big challenge to us. As you will know, or many will know in the room, access to credit for small and medium-scale businesses in Africa remains a very, very big challenge. The resources are not available, and when they are available, they are very expensive. The rates of interest are extremely high, to an extent that then the business is not sustainable. So we have worked very hard to try and bring down the cost, the effective cost of credit to small and medium-scale enterprises, sometimes lending below market rates. And this, again, is aimed at spurring development, particularly in agriculture and small businesses.
I see. Let me come to you again, Jay. The African American Institute's mission is to increase the capacity of African nationals and African institutions, and to be a convener of thought leaders to discuss the challenges and solutions for the African continent. To this end, what are the solutions to the human capacity challenges facing the continent today, in your view?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges for growth is a combination of physical infrastructure and human infrastructure. The physical one is power, logistics, healthcare, et cetera. The human one is more education and more people that have the training and capability to go in and work across different industries and continuing to grow. And I think the biggest thing, part of that is, as the professor said in his remarks, is that, we need to bolster the universities and the school systems to really continue to generate the population. There's going to be 70% of the African population is going to be under the age of 35 very shortly. And we need to make sure that they are trained and they have the skills to be able to get jobs and continue to grow the economy.
Terrific. Professor, what about you? Do you agree with Jay?
Yes, I think if one looks at the history of AI, it has, in the first round, it brought you to do undergraduate studies. And the second round, it was AfriGrad, which produced some of the first African faculty came from that program. I think we're now in the perhaps third, fourth phase, and this phase should mean, I think, reinforcing African universities. And that can be done in many ways, including exchange of faculties and trying to bring back some of the Africans in diaspora back. But I think the importance of developing faculty for African universities is extremely important. The World Bank estimates that we need something like 450,000 faculty for African universities. The current population of universities in Africa is about 6 million people. The fastest growing university population in the world is in Africa, but no faculty. So I hope that AI can use its enormous capacity for mobilizing education resources to go back to look at this whole question of generating the third, fourth generation of faculty for African universities.
Now, Vivienne, you are obviously in the front line when it comes to this. What about you? What are some of the possible solutions, frankly?
I think the solution for the challenges that have been mentioned by my colleagues on the podium in terms of education is how to deliver quality education to the largest number of students in the shortest possible time. That's what we see the challenges. And this is education right from the primary school level up to the institutions of higher learning. And it is a challenge to expect to sort of, for each country to develop quality institutions and have the right faculty and have the right resources and have the right equipment for some of the courses in a short time. So we think that a more practical solution would be to begin to develop centers of excellence, which could be regionally based, where the existing universities would pool resources together and try and build and improve the quality of education that is available. And if you look at some of the more capital-intensive faculty like medicine, engineering, and agriculture, particularly applied sciences, these require a lot of resources, both human and financial. And the only way we think, or one of the ways that this can be done quickly is, yes, to partner with universities outside the region and then to create centers of excellence, which can then be used to train the people within the region.
I see. Let me come to you again, Jay. The theme this evening is powering Africa's growth through regional integration and global partnerships. However, integration and partnerships cannot be successful if individual governments are not strong or are not accountable to their people or are not sensitive to the issues affecting their people. If you could wave a magic wand and produce two solutions for African governments, what would they be?
Yikes. Well, the theme of I think, again, I go back to the education and skills building is going to be key. There are two key things, I think. One is making sure that there's a continuing educational focus throughout the time frame of children. So when they do get to the university age, they have a standard level of capability that then the universities can take and mold, and then after that, companies can take and mold. And I think one of the other key things that we're very focused on in GE with our foundation work is making sure there's equal opportunity, and for both boys and girls. There's an important aspect of having girls' education in Africa. It needs to be worked on in many countries, And I think that equal opportunity and the focus on education would be one where I'd focus my wand, if you will, for magic.
I see. Thank you. Professor, there is a phenomenon going on right now. Some people, in fact, have referred to it as perhaps the second, like in a way, like the second time that Africa is in fact being partitioned or by outsiders and all that kind of stuff. Have you heard about that? I mean,
Yeah,
the first time it was 1884, 85 in Berlin.
The second scramble for
The
Africa.
second
yes.
struggle for Africa. Some people have suggested that, yeah, you can talk about partnership, but partnering with who? Because it looks like, frankly, when it comes to Africa, yeah, looking towards the East, but actually it looks like it is the East coming to Africa.
Well, obviously, if we are asleep, people will come and take our resources. I'm a little bit skeptical about the notion of the scramble for Africa because in a way it treats Africa passively. Africa has shown a capacity to resist. So I think those who would want to recolonize Africa should remember that Africa is a place which has produced the Kenyatas, Mandelas, and so forth. It can resist as a continent. So it's not as easy as they think it will. However, we are living in a world in which most of the world is regrouping in regional organizations to engage the global world. And for Africa, if we go to the rest of the world one by one, I don't think we'll succeed. I think much of what's called trade discussions in the world are not about free trade. They're about regulating trade, and that requires negotiations. You have to negotiate, and negotiations requires some regional regrouping and some ability to deal with the world. I would argue, which was the question about, it's very important that member states are very strong. You cannot build an African unity based on weak states. I mean, it's very important that member states are strong. And that's strong, I'm not talking about military strength. No, I'm talking about strength in the sense that they are embedded in their societies and that somehow they explain to their citizens why they're joining ECOWAS, why they're joining SADC, why they're joining different organizations. So that this thing called Pan-Africanism is anchored in day-to-day lives of the people. Right now it's very top-heavy. People don't know about what's going on. So I would call for a strong nation states which are aware of the regional dimension, but also are very anchored in their own people's.
Vivienne, thank you. Vivienne, I was once interviewing an African president, and we were talking about resources. We're talking about oil and what have you, exploration. And the president said, we are tired with having American, British, or European, experts. Maybe what we need actually is to get Chinese, to get, Asians, that kind of stuff. Then I said, wait a minute. There is something you haven't talked about, Mr. President. You haven't talked about your own people. Why don't you think in terms of your own people? Why don't you have confidence in your own people? Because frankly, they are the ones that have to be in the front line of patriotism. How do you respond to that?
Well, I would agree. But I think the challenge would be how to get your citizens to a level where they can articulate the interests of the country on an equal footing with the rest of the world. And I think if I was asked the question that you had asked Jay, where I would want to wave my magic wand, I think the first place I would want to wave it would be with those departments or ministries that are responsible for finance and planning of our countries, because they are the ones who are responsible for fiscal policy. They are the ones who are responsible for budget allocation and for revenue collection. And one of the biggest challenges that we see in Africa is that despite significant resources being developed or being extracted from African countries, there's very little return on those investments, which means that there must be a gap in the fiscal policy, or there must be a gap in the revenue collection. So I would want to strengthen the ministries of finance or the revenue collection agencies in order to ensure that African countries are able to get a reasonable return for the resources that are extracted from the continent. With those resources, you would then be in a better position to plan for education. You'd be able to buy the expertise that you need to be able to negotiate fair trade agreements. You'll be able to train your people in the best universities in the world, which is what other regions have done. You'll be able to buy the knowledge. You'll be able to partner and interact on an equal footing. So I think I would want to tackle with my one the Ministry of Finance. The other would be the ministries responsible for justice and ministries responsible for legal advice, because they're the ones that negotiate on behalf of the countries, and they're the ones that sign bilateral agreements. They're the ones who sign trade agreements. So we would need to build capacity in those particular departments so that they are able, again, to bring a balanced agreements. I don't think it matters the origin or the nationality of the investor. I think what matters is the quality of the discussion on the table and the agreements that you're able to develop out of that discussion.
I see. Well. Unfortunately, as I often say on Straight Talk Africa, time is not our best ally. Now, having said that, this is the last question. And it was submitted, of course, as I pointed out earlier, by Chika Dunga, the winner of AAI's social media contest. The bonus question is, J, the arrival of the 21st century brings a new potential member to global and regional partnerships with Africa millennials of the African diaspora. Numerous studies describe this group as being intelligent and having an insatiable hunger for success. What partnerships have created avenues to engage this talented demographic and provide incentives for them to become involved in Africa's development? Are there leadership opportunities? Additionally, if these avenues do exist, what are some prominent examples that partnerships can emulate?
That's a long question. I think that, the diaspora is an absolute critical tool for the advancement of Africa. And I think it's up to all of us that are on the continent to provide opportunities to get the diaspora back, and so they see that they can succeed and continue to grow and fulfill their dreams. And I think there's a number of different programs. We have one in GE that's called Back to Africa, and we've attracted probably 30 or 40 diaspora people that are our employees that were in the United States or Europe. And I think we just need to continue to provide great opportunities, and then people come. People will go where they can create wealth, where they can create opportunities, and where they can create value. And that's up to us to provide that. So that's how I would answer that.
I see. Thank you. Professor?
Yeah, well, other countries that have done, that we admire, have used their diasporas quite effectively. I mean, we know about India and its IT diasporas. We know of China's, a huge part of China's foreign investment into China was from diasporas in Taiwan, Singapore, and Hong Kong. We know also that countries like Israel have used their diasporas. So there are many countries which have used their diasporas quite effectively. The problem in the African case is there are two problems. One, the nature of our diasporas. We have got historical diaspora of Africa and then the much later African generation. And there are two different diasporas, as it were. And secondly, the other problem is on our side, the African side, on how do we receive our diasporas. We haven't really done much thinking about, we still think about diasporas as someone who must come home and settle at home. But you can use diasporas even when they're still abroad.
Right.
You can hire them for 3 months, to teach for 3 months and go back. I mean, there are many ways with IT. You can have people as mentoring students from abroad. While they're, we just have to be more creative on mobilizing what is an obvious resource that we have abroad. We have not been creative so far. We've just waited for people to come there as individuals on their own. We need some structures that facilitate these movements of people, not necessarily to their country of origin. They can be anywhere in Africa. But we just have to think of ways of how to mobilize these resources.
Well, someone could talk about perhaps transforming brain drain into a sort of brain gain.
Yes, yes.
What about that, Vivienne? Again, you are in the front line. Is there something you can do from your vantage point to re-attract people from the diaspora to go back home and make contributions?
Yeah. I think the characterizing the diaspora, it's quite a wide range of different personalities and interests. There are those members of the diaspora who really want to go back home, and they have made a determination that they want to go back to Africa to serve. And those are the most sort of easily adaptable because they have already made up their mind to go home. I think the challenging group is the group that wants to come back home or wants to come back to Africa, but expects that there'll be certain incentives created for them to come home. And I think that's where the challenge is. I think there needs to be a reality check that if you're going to come back to Africa, then we expect you to come to Africa and to work with your fellow Africans in building the continent. You need to take the continent as you find it and work with those that you find there, to develop the continent. I don't think there can be sort of a different characterization for the diaspora and for, say, the African youth who are also trying to find opportunities in the same sectors. Again, what I'd like to say sometimes to the diaspora when I speak to them, that you bring the value of education that you've received abroad, but you don't have the local knowledge and culture that you would only be able to assimilate if you lived in the country. So therefore, you must be able to work with your colleagues that you find in the country and exchange ideas with them in order then to be able to contribute effectively to the continent.
Well, on that note, Vivienne, Professor Andje, I'd like to take this opportunity, frankly, to thank you so much for providing thoughtful responses to all of the questions. We all play a role in contributing to sustainable development in Africa.